Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the How Did You Learn to Do That podcast. Thank you so much for coming back week after week and supporting us in this journey. I hope that the stories that we've shared has proven valuable to you and has set you on your own journey to exploring and connecting with yourself deeper and on your journey to your purpose in life. And we would love if you could please support us by sharing, liking, and subscribing our podcast, as well as our YouTube channel and all our social media accounts with your family, your friends, and your community. And today we have a great guest for our younger audience. So those that are in their early 20s, that are just exploring moving from high school to college and, just completing their bachelor's degree. So I'm so excited for you to hear the story of Vineeta Prasad, and I can't wait to have her on. Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome our guest for this week, Vineeta Prasad. She's a 25-year-old that has been born and raised in Vancouver, and she currently lives there now. She is currently a student studying counseling psychology in a counseling psychology program, and she works in social services. She's also the host of her own podcast called the Young Culture Podcast, which is a platform for young adults to share their ideas and opinions. She has a passion for well-being, traveling, learning about different cultures and worldviews, and most importantly, she has a passion for understanding how fear plays a role in our everyday lives, how we can become aware of this fear-based thinking, and replacing it with making choices confidently and bringing in joy into our lives. So thank you, Vineeta, for joining me this week for this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And for those that might be interested, Vineeta and I connected on Instagram through our podcast, mutual podcast. So she's going to be on my podcast this week, and I'll be on hers soon too.
Yes, the one of the positives of social networking.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
It's been amazing to have this community and to connect with people like you since I've started this podcast.
Yeah, I feel like social media often gets a bad rap for things, but if you think about it, if we didn't have Instagram, we would have never connected with each other, and we would not known that we exist or anything like that. So there are some positives of social media.
Yes, using it intentionally, and there's lots of positives that come out of that. So I think that's amazing. Yeah, that's so true. So, so Vineeta has an interesting story of how her podcast has helped her with her purpose in life and her path forward. So I'm going to pass it over to you and ask you how you got started in this journey and what kind of led you to your podcast and to studying counseling psychology.
Yeah, so okay, I guess we have time. So I'll tell you the whole story.
Yeah.
So I've always been a person who's been pretty quiet, who likes to, just hide from the crowd, didn't want to speak up. And I was just so scared. I was so scared that if I say something, someone's going to judge me or someone's going to think it's weird or say something stupid. And I kind of lived life like this. I was always a very highly anxious child. That happened in my teenage years and even in my early adult years, just always anxious and just always scared, and I just didn't want to speak up. So I work in social services and community services, and last year I got this opportunity to go to a conference in New York. So it was actually to attend a UN conference and it was a big conference worldwide, learning about the rights of young girls and women and how they're affected socially, and it was a really cool experience. So before going to this conference, the organization that sent us there, they asked us if we can present our work during this time. And in my head, I was just like, why do you want me to present? What could I possibly do to add value to this? I have nothing good to say or nothing impactful, but I was so scared to say no because they were so kind enough to take us that I was like, no, I can't say no. I have to think of something. I have to say something and do it. So I said yes. So then that was that. And then they also asked me to do a blog post. And then again, I was like, why do they keep asking me to do this? What am I supposed to say? And what am I supposed to do? Anything that I say and do is not going to be interesting. And they're not going to like it. And then they're going to be disappointed and just going through this unraveling of just all these really limiting thoughts. So then I got there and it was really amazing. And what really stuck out for me were the younger people that were presenting, and there were a lot of youth that were there. And these two youth that really stuck out to me, it was day 2 of the conference, and I believe it was Girl Scouts of America, and then there was a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they were talking about just like all the things that they're passionate about and why they are the way they are and how much inspiration they have from the community and from people like them and the people that help them out. And I was just like, I was in awe, and I was like, well, how are these young girls talking with such conviction and such passion, and like they're not scared to share how they feel, and they're in front of a group of people from like all over the world. And I don't know, something in that moment, it just like really hit me right here and really inspired me. And as soon as that happened, I had a notebook with me, and as I was hearing their speech, something just clicked inside, and I opened my notebook, and like my hands were on fire, like I couldn't stop writing. And I was so inspired. And what ended up happening that week was I did create a blog post, and I actually really enjoyed writing the blog post. And then at the end, I did my presentation. And yeah, just like throwing yourself out there and putting yourself in this space where there's a lot of people there and there's a lot of like value in what you're doing, it really helped me. And having that opportunity to share what I was passionate about and having people be receptive towards that, it really just had lasting implications for me. And I was on a high that week. It was really great. And so what ended up happening was once that week was done and on my way back home, I had a really like humbling moment, and I was like, my life would have been so different if someone didn't give me this chance to like have this opportunity to speak in front of other people and to feel good about it too. So I really wanted to do something to pay it forward. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, I can't be the only one who has this issue of holding back because they're scared and they're worried about what other people think. I
Yeah.
feel like there are so many people out there who have really great ideas, but they'll kind of just stop themselves from doing it. So I thought not everyone's going to have that opportunity to go to New York and like attend this conference and do this speech. So why not create something a little bit more casual that I can bring back home and give other people the opportunity to share what they're passionate about in the hopes that they'll continue sharing and feel good about what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
that's my story.
amazing. That's amazing. That, sometimes it's just moments, that come to you and they just make so much sense, and then you just are so inspired and just kind of everything becomes clearer for you.
Mhm.
It sounds like that's what happened with you, in your passion. So I know you shared about that conference and how you came back, and then you got realized that this is something you wanted to do. How did you decide that you wanted to go down this path, um, to setting up your podcast? But not only that, but getting into counseling psychology. What was it about that program or that path that really invigorated you to apply and get started on that journey?
Yeah. So, okay. So to start off with the podcasting. Podcasting was really funny. I was in my hotel room and I was thinking about it. I'm like, what would I want to do that'd be really cool? At the time, I'm like, oh, I should do a podcast. No one does podcasts. It's like there's probably no local podcasts. I'll just do that. And I actually before this like social media and just like being on the internet stuff, it wasn't something that I would regularly do. So I actually didn't do much research into it. I didn't think about it beforehand, and I think it worked in my favor. I think if I would have done like too much, I think yeah, sometimes when you do too much research and you look into it too much, you almost kind of, you do the opposite for yourself, and then you're just like, never mind, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, I didn't do much research into it. And why I decided to do a podcast was I thought maybe because mine is not visual, it's just audio, it wouldn't be such an intimidating process for people to want to be on it. And also for myself, I think I still am, and even more so at that time, wasn't so comfortable with speaking up. So I thought maybe doing the audio route might be a good transition. So that's why I decided to do the podcast of all things. And usually when I think of an idea, I'll usually, like I said, I'll think about it so hard that I won't do it. And then this was the first time where I thought about it and I was like, okay, this is a good idea and I'm going to continue with it. So I kind of like, it was just kind of one of those intuitive things. Like it just popped into my head and I was like, okay, this feels good and I'll do it. And then, so for the counseling side of things, so I work in social services and I have a degree in sociology and I did my minor in family studies. So, this kind of process of supporting people and helping people in this sense, that's always been something that I've been passionate about and I've enjoyed doing. And so, it wasn't until last summer, yeah, like last year I had so many realizations, but it wasn't until last summer I was working in this position and it was an upgrade to what I was usually doing. And
Mhm.
I thought it was like a higher pay, it was a higher job status, and it was in a great place and everything like that. So I really thought that because this happened that there would be more like joy and fulfillment in my life. And so I'm going through it and it's months are going by and I'm not happy. I'm exhausted, I'm irritated, I find no sense of purpose in this job. And I was really like taking a step back and I was reflecting. I'm like, I thought this was something I would enjoy. Like, I worked so hard for this to kind of get here. And why am I still unhappy? And then after some reflecting, I kind of realized that because of my lack of confidence, because I go through life with so much fear, I tend to stick to jobs that are in my comfort zone, but that I can have the opportunity to do more if I wanted. But I never put myself in those open, scary situations and then had to try to work up to it. So I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I think because of that, it wasn't serving me anymore. And so when I also graduated from my bachelor's degree, I was one of those people, like once I graduated, like gave that place the finger, like, you're never going to see me here again. Like, I don't want to do schooling anymore. Like, it's so hard. And I used to have this really strong conviction, like, you don't need to upgrade your education to, do stuff, like school doesn't mean anything, blah, blah, blah. But once again, it was my fear talking. It wasn't me like saying that, like, of course, like I'm in school, there was always a sense of interest in it, but I think I wanted to always talk it down because I was so scared of putting myself out there and wondering, okay, if I put myself out there, what's going to happen? Like, what if I get rejected? That's just going to confirm that I'm not smart like I always thought I was. So,
Mhm.
anyways, so yeah, this work realization happened. So it was a little bit of frustration and it was a little bit of being inspired. So I felt more inspired and more confident because I did put myself out there to do this podcast that I knew nothing about, had no technology experience, no speaking experience, didn't really like socializing with people. And then that turned out so well, and putting myself out there worked really great. So then I had this other fuel in me of like, I don't want to be stuck in this position anymore. So I kind of put those two together and it was just kind of like, again, it like intuitively just clicked. I'm like, okay, I think I want to go back to school. And so the funny thing about this is I haven't been in school for a few years. It's been 3 years since I graduated from my bachelor's degree. And after I graduated from my bachelor's degree, I didn't think about my master's because I was so convinced that I didn't have good enough grades to get in, or that I wouldn't be convincing enough for someone to accept me. So it's funny how timing works, because as soon as I applied for my schooling, I looked at my old transcript and my GPA was fine. Like, I just convinced myself that I
Yeah.
couldn't do it. So yeah, so that's kind of how all of that happened, and I decided to do it, and I have no regrets. Like, I'm really happy with everything that I've been doing right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know that you just touched on such an important point that we just don't believe in ourselves. We don't have enough faith in ourselves. And we create this story of how it's hard, or we're just not smart enough, or we don't have the GPA that we need to get in. So it's not even an option. And we just limit and put up those barriers and those blocks right away. Um, but once we have that opportunity to actually reflect and realize, no, like I can do this, these, it is challenging, but I'm going to step forth and I'm actually going to try to do this.
Mhm.
And then when we reflect back, we realize that actually it wasn't as bad as I thought it was, but it was just how I felt about it. It was just the story that I told myself about it. And I think I can resonate with you too, because in my undergrad, I wanted to go to med school. And so I was doing pre-med, health sciences, public health. And I, got to a point where I was like, I just don't know if I can commit another 4 years to med school. And then on top of that, another 5 years for residency, and then, multiple certifications and specialties and whatnot after that. and I was like, I'll study public health and, kind of I can get a job with my bachelor's and that's good enough for me. But I always knew that I wanted to have a master's degree. So when I, finished my bachelor's degree, I went to my master's right away. And then I completed it and it was fine. But I recently went back and I looked and I was like, what it like someone I know was trying to get into med school and I was giving them some advice on applications and studying and, the life that I had previously trying to get into med
Mhm.
school. And then I looked back and I realized that, I never really applied because I kind of said no to myself.
Mhm, mhm.
But then also in that moment, I realized that all those stuff that I said that I couldn't do or I didn't believe in myself, when you do reflect and you look, you realize like, no, actually, it's almost like, when you have selective hearing, it's like almost
Yeah,
sometimes you have selective sight, you
yeah,
see a
yeah.
certain grade or you see a certain transcript. But when I looked back, I was like, you know what, actually, I could have gotten into med school with these grades.
Mhm.
It's just that that's something that I didn't want to do at that time. And when I dug deeper, I realized that it was actually another reason why I didn't want to go to med school that had nothing to do with my grades. It was just the grades were kind of the excuse or the story I had set up for myself,
Yeah.
which was surface level. But when I got deeper into it, I realized it was just more because, my values aligned different from med school and more into the world of public health. And that's kind of where my passion lied. So it was almost like I was trying to justify why I wanted to do public health and not go to med school, and so I made up all these reasons.
Yeah.
But then you start to believe that after a while, right?
Mhm.
And taking that time to actually dissect it and reflect and realize that no, this is actually not the story that I want to tell myself. I want to tell myself a more positive story.
Yeah.
You start to believe and you start achieving those dreams. So kudos for you for going back and looking at that and realizing that no, you can do it and you do want to go back to school. Because I also, my very last exam of my bachelor's degree, I also left like the school with a big smile on my face and a big like never coming back here ever again. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think that that's, it's just a part of the journey, I guess, because
Mhm.
it's a grind to be in a bachelor's program for 4 to 5 years, even more sometimes. um it's a grind. So if you don't leave feeling like that, sometimes I wonder if you worked as hard as you could have worked.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I also feel like there's a bit of a learning. I don't know if it's because I'm in a counseling program or if this is just like my master's versus my bachelor's, but I feel like I went to a big school and I had like 300 kids in each class. And so I feel like this is a bigger systematic issue. I'm not going to blame a person, but I do feel like oftentimes it was that the way that I learned didn't work with the professor or the way that I wanted to intellectually explain myself. It wasn't on par with the values of the person that was marking it. So I
Right.
feel like often in those times, it just there just became this issue of like the feedback that I got, I wasn't able to process it properly. Like it always became this shame thing. Like if I got a bad mark, it's like I wasn't a straight A student and by no means did I have a 4.0 GPA. Like I struggled a lot with my bachelor's degree, and it was the feedback that I would get that would just kind of like add on layer and layer and layer, and it would almost make me believe like I'm not like a scholarly person, like I'm not a smart person. And it's so funny. I'm like really enjoying my program right now and I'm getting good grades. And in the beginning it was really hard. And I carried on this anxiety that I had from like when I was younger and I was in school. And then there was this really hard paper that I did and I got 90% on it. And in my head in that moment, the thing that I said was, I guess I'm not as dumb as I thought I was.
Yeah.
Like, and then I kind of like was held back for a second. I was like, what did I just say to myself? And then it just kind of opened this door for me, and I started to think about every time that I kind of allowed someone else to dictate my intelligence, and
Mm-hmm.
just like all those negative feedback from like profs, for example, or like a bad test grade. Like when you're younger and you don't kind of have that foundation for yourself and that self-worth, like you allow those negative comments to come in, and because it's supposed to be someone of authority, and someone who's teaching you these things, you assume that what they're saying is true. But I don't know, now that I'm older, I kind of realize that everyone has their own value system, everyone has their own interpretation, and it shouldn't matter. Like even in a school setting, like you should take in what they say, but it doesn't always like, you shouldn't always hold it to like 100%. Like you should also think for yourself too, like who am I as a person? And you shouldn't let them dictate that. If you're capable enough of doing something, like you should believe that you can do that. And I think in my life that's something that I kind of lacked a lot. Like I relied on other people to kind of create the self-worth for myself when I wasn't able to create a foundation for myself. So I
Mhm.
think now as I'm older and there is negative feedback or someone does say something, I don't internalize it as much as I used to. I kind of like, okay, I respect what you're saying, but this is also how I feel about myself, and I know that it's different.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that because I think that that is something that, a lot of people, I talk a lot about like the vanity metrics of like just, not even just on social media, but just in everyday life, right? So when you're leaving high school, it's almost like, what is the biggest school you can get into? And, in Vancouver, where both of us are from, the biggest schools are the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University, right? And then there's also the University of Victoria on the island, but it's kind of like those are the three big schools that people want to go to, and it kind of like when you get into those, it's almost like a notch in your belt. Like, yeah, I got into SFU or I got into UBC or UVic, and it's like there's so many other schools that are so good, but there's smaller schools with smaller classrooms, and people view those as almost like stepping stone kind of schools. But and I think that's so important what you say, because yes, when you need to understand your learning abilities, like how do you learn best and how do
Mhm.
you learn deeply? What is the environment you want to surround yourself with? And I think that, as young people, you know, we don't often ask ourselves, what do I need?
Yeah.
For myself, like what makes me thrive? What's the
Mhm.
environment that I need to thrive in? Because if we look at plants, for example, every single plant, big or small, thrives in a different environment. They need different things, but they're
Mhm.
all the same. They're all just plants. They're all beautiful. Their one goal is to grow and to flourish, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that as young people, we don't ask ourselves, what do I need? What do I need to grow? What do I need to
I was like,
flourish?
that's the last thing if you have time.
Yeah, and it's almost like I feel like it's backwards. Like you ask yourself afterwards, right? And yeah, and I was, I went to SFU and I had those like 300, 400, sometimes even 500-person classes where you just felt like another person. Like you didn't feel connected, you didn't feel engaged, you didn't feel like you were able to have that relationship with your professor, or even
Mhm.
that relationship to understand the material or have that support to help you, because realistically one person cannot support 500 students.
Yeah,
We're
definitely.
all trying to learn something. So, and then when I got into, as you get to university, into third and fourth year, as you get into smaller classes, right? Smaller groups of people. And in your master's, it's small as they don't have huge, big, large programs. It is smaller and it's more intense. It's more intimate, but you feel that you're thriving more. The
Mhm.
content is harder than your bachelor's degree, perhaps, but you're doing better because you're more engaged,
Yeah.
engaged with the professors, the students, the projects, the work, all of it, right? And I think that is really key. So for any young people listening, I think that you have to ask yourself, what are you looking for in school first, before you start applying based on vanity metrics or based on kind of what your friends are doing or what other people think you should be doing, because what's important for you is very personal to you and not
Mhm.
something that anybody else can really tell you to do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like the way that society has constructed how a person is supposed to grow and develop. Like I start to see more research and more articles and more evidence that kind of is challenging what the norm is, which I think is awesome. But I do feel like there's still a long way to go. And in the steps, like I reflect on my life, for example, 18, hello, I was like, it's so dumb and just so, just trying to absorb everything and just like challenging things and exploring and stuff. And school is a lot of money, and to have to decide a program that you have to do, because you have to like assume what kind, not that you have to know what career you want to do, but kind of what area you want to go into. I do
Mhm.
feel like that's a lot of pressure. And looking now, tuition's not what it costed when our parents went to school. Like, it's expensive, and to kind of
Yeah.
have to go through that and do the hard work and pay thousands and thousands of dollars each year. And then a lot of people are thinking, oh, I've already spent this much money on this program, I'm just going to ride it out because I
Yeah.
spent that much money. And then you go through this whole unfulfilling process, and then until you can't handle it anymore, and then you're able to reroute. Or some people, they get so overwhelmed they just stop in total. Or there's just like there's so many things in how we're supposed to kind of navigate life that gives you the opportunity to restrict you and overwhelm you. And my wish and my hope is that there's kind of more of an openness to kind of explore and be free. Like, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a mom, I don't know what I'll be like when I'm a mom. Maybe I'll be a monster, I don't know. But when I have kids, like, I don't want to put those expectations on them. Like, if you're in grade 12 and you legitimately don't know what you want to do in post-secondary, I'm not gonna just bully you and harass you into making a choice because you need to be in school. Like, that's going to have longer lasting, harsher effects on the person. Like, I'd rather them just be able to explore and feel good about what they want to do and understand themselves, and then go
Yeah.
forward from
Yeah, I agree. My mom, she has a master's in child psychology.
there.
Um, and she, growing up kind of let us make our own decisions, and her motto was always that, you can do what you'd like, but if there's consequences, you have to pay for it and I can't help you with it. And so my
Okay.
sister and I, we kind of led with that mentality.
Mhm.
And we almost like created our own boundaries and our own barriers and our own
Mhm.
what's okay and what's not okay. And it wasn't created for us
Yeah.
because we had a pretty open childhood. Like we didn't have curfews. We were allowed to kind of do whatever we wanted, but we always had this fear of if there's a consequence, no one will help us. So we were able to keep ourselves in check that way. But when it came to university, I remember my parents, they just didn't put that pressure on me to say what I should and shouldn't do. Like, I mean, my dad was the one that was like, I really want you to be a doctor. Since I was a kid, he's had this dream. And I said, okay, dad, yeah, I like that. That's something that I would like to pursue. But for now, I don't know. I'll let you know. And then I remember my last year of high school, I just wanted to kind of leave the area. I felt a little rebellious. So
Yeah.
the only school I applied to was UBC in the Okanagan, which is about 5 hours from Vancouver for those that don't know the area very well. And then I got accepted, and then I told my parents I'm going to Kelowna or Kamloops. And they just, that's, I guess, where the line was drawn. And they were like, no, like we
They're
were
like,
not.
wait, why did I let you pick?
Yeah, they, drew the line and they were like, no, you can't go. And then I said, okay, then if I can't go, I'm not going to school. And they were like, sure, and I realized that I took that year to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, ask those questions, where my passion or where my purpose in life is. And, I started to get interested in the world of business. But I always had medical school kind of in my background, in my head, because it is something that just kind of came naturally to me, and I just loved it. Right? I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah, and then I spent a couple of years where I just went to a local college, and I just dabbled in tons of different courses,
Yeah.
just to kind of see, what do I like, what do I not like? Because like you said, I was, not wanting to invest so much money because, I had to pay for school myself. And it was like, I didn't want to pay for an entire program that, I don't know if I was going to pursue. Because I mean, I don't know if you resonate with this, but when you pick a program, you don't really know what's going what it's going to be like.
Oh, I didn't know
So,
anything. I just went with it because I thought thought I
yeah,
had choice.
right. So you just kind of apply to program because the name sounds interesting, or the bio sounds interesting. But once you get in, a lot of the times it's something totally different than when you expected, good or bad. Um, so I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to spend all that money. So I did spend this time, kind of exploring, and I remember one semester, my list of courses were kind of all over the place. There was like a biology course, there was a business law course, there was a philosophy course. And then I did like I can't remember, like a digital marketing or like, no, digital communication course. So there was, 4 different, totally different areas just to kind of see what I liked best, and I think that that's important to just do some exploration. But even if you do a program and you realize it's not the one for you and you just want to move, like pivot and move to something else, I think it's important to not let your fear of feeling like you're going to be incompleting this program stop you from pursuing your purpose or your passion in life.
I totally agree. And I feel like fear is such a debilitating feeling. And often, like, I really took some time this year to reflect. And I'm like, a lot of the things that I do, the decisions that I make is based out of fear, not out of joy. And for example, like you said, like, I feel like a lot of times people, when they're decision making, they would take that opportunity and they'd be like, okay, well, I'm already like a few years into this, and if I don't then complete it, then it's going to be a waste. Like that is fear-based thinking. Like, I'm going to waste all this time and all this money and all this
Yep.
stuff. And yeah, like a lot of times everything's been decided out of fear. And like a good example I'm sure a lot of people would resonate with is like picking jobs. I've gone through a few different jobs in the past few years, and the last job that I had picked, it was between this job and another job, and I was looking at it from a fear-based place. Which job is going to give me the pay that I need? Which job am I least likely to get laid off of if something happens? Which job is, like, all those kind of things. And I know a lot of people do that, and like that's kind of how we've been conditioned to kind of process things. But then I was just going through a hole, and then after a while someone did say to me too, like, well, which one's going to make you happier? And then I was just like, what do you mean happiness? Like, what do you mean
What is this?
bring me more joy? Like, what does this mean? So yeah, and I kind of like realized I've been trying to practice this, like whenever making decisions, like don't pick the answer that's gonna like invoke less problems. Like, pick the one that's gonna be more exciting in the long term and kind of work along with it. And yeah, that's just kind of been my thing. And I've realized it's been a lot easier to kind of make decisions that way. I feel like when you're kind of going from a place of fear, like you're stressing yourself out even more, just trying to think of all the worst case scenarios, like whether you think about it or not, it's going to happen regardless. Like, if it's meant to, it will. And it's just easier if you can kind of go into it with good intentions and like good spirit. Like, I feel like you can handle those stressful situations easier. But I know that often, like even for myself, I feel like if I can kind of like plan out the problem beforehand, it'll be easier. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that actually happens that way. I think it just kind of adds more stress onto you.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree that you know, being able to take risks that take you out of your comfort zone is very, very important. And, I saw this graphic last week, and I'm trying to think where it's from. And if I remember, I'll post it on my Instagram for you and my blog for you to see. But there was a bubble that said, this is your comfort zone, right? And then there was this larger bubble over here, and it said, this is where the magic happens.
Yeah,
And
100.
it's like you jump out of your comfort zone and you go to the place where the magic is going to happen. And an example that I could share is that, when I was done my master's degree, I was looking for a job, and, there were jobs in public health are, few and far between. They're difficult to find. And people that do work in public health, they tend to stay in those positions for a long time. So there's not a whole lot of turnover. So at the time I was looking, okay, if I don't want to work, if I can't find a job in public health, I want to work in the health system. So there was this job that was a management level job. in risk management, which, I didn't do risk management. I knew nothing about it, like nothing. And I was, um, like, I didn't even know what it meant. Like, it was that, like, my knowledge level of risk management was that low that, like, I didn't even know what risk management was. But I just decided, you know what the heck, I'll apply. Like, I probably won't get it, but let's just see what happens. But then it ended up being that I did get the job, and I went into the role, and it was, working with high level executives all across the health system. And I had no idea. So I, spent my first month reading every book, researching everything I could to figure out, what it was and what I needed to do. But in the end, once I moved on from that role, I realized that, and I moved on to that role into public health again. But in that, year and a half to 2 years I was in that role, I realized that I learned so much more. I grew so much more as a person, as a professional. My knowledge level increased significantly. Um, and I created this program, that job, is still one of my most favorite jobs that I've ever had.
Yeah.
And I still, check in about it to see how it's going, even though I'm not a part of the team, because I'm always interested to know, what happened, what's going on, what's, kind of keep up to date on it. And I think that those, if I never had that opportunity, I would have never brought in my skill set to that level. And yeah, and I thought it was awesome. I made some great connections, some great friends out of that. And it just kind of teaches you that even if you feel underqualified for a position, or you feel that you don't have the knowledge, if you just apply for it, you will get the knowledge. And I always say that, it was like, no matter what program, school, job, whatever, sport, whatever it is, you will learn. If you
Yeah.
have the determination for it, you will learn how to do that job, how to study that program, that knowledge, the sport, whatever it is, a language, you will learn it. It's just, you have to be willing to take that risk and be in that place where you're vulnerable,
Yeah.
right? Because like you said, we often want to just do what we know we can do, and that we could grow if we choose to,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I do feel like, even like your example, if you had really just focused on the negative and like the fear part about not taking that job, like who knows where you, like, I'm sure you would have still gone a different route, but you would have been in a place of being like stuck. Like you would have been in your comfort zone, but
For
you
sure.
chose to look past that. And like you said, that's where the magic happens. And yeah, I feel like fear kind of keeps us in the short-term bubble and just safety. But that's like the hardest part I find, is that because you don't, like, we're so stuck in this like not knowing the what's in the unknown, that fear of that unknown, it just keeps us in these safe places. And yeah, I still struggle with it too. I don't think anyone's perfect with this. Like, it happens often, but those times when you can choose to be like, oh, what would happen? Like, what good could happen if I choose instead of what could go wrong? Like, I think it's such a beautiful space to be in. And yeah, I don't think anything bad could happen out of it. Like, if you want to interpret it as something bad, then sure. But if you want to, like you said, you got so much learning experience out of that, then there's no loss in that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that, yeah, it's important that you just take a moment to realize what are your fears, what limiting stories or beliefs do you tell yourself, and how do you stop yourself from reaching out of your comfort zone and into your dreams and making that come to fruition. And I know you shared a lot about how identifying your fears has changed your life, from, allowing you to write the blog post after that conference, share and speak in front of um, the conference, as well as starting your podcast, and then applying for your program that you're in right now. But what piece of advice what are your, one or two pieces of advice that you would give to somebody like you that is just coming out of either high school or their bachelor's degree, but kind of, having those same beliefs and just wanting to overcome that? What would you say to them?
For me, when I get into this space of fear, it's like very like mentally debilitating, and it's almost a space where you kind of give up and give in. What I've learned in this past year is that when you are feeling these feelings of just like being scared and like these negative spaces, like if you can hear yourself like saying why things can go wrong, like that's kind of a point where you need to reflect and kind of challenge yourself. It's really a point of kind of rewiring a bit, and it does take a lot of time. It is frustrating, but it's worth it at the end. Like if you're going to go to school, if you're like scared about a school that you want to go to or a program that you want to take, but you're already thinking about what could go wrong, cost, not getting in or not being smart enough, really just look at the opposite and just, you know, make that chart, make that Venn diagram, whatever, journal entries, and just see, okay, I'm not like, what if that doesn't work out for me? But at the same time, why am I so curious about it? Like you kind of have to look at the two sides. And I would say, yeah, don't give up and just keep trying. And, you know, I think we said this earlier, like you won't know unless you try. And it's like the scariest part is the trying part. And really just find this sense of like self and create this foundation for yourself where that if you try it and it doesn't work out, that's okay. And I also, another thing that popped into my head too is don't feel pressured and don't feel rushed. Like you should want to reflect and you should want to be able to make those positive changes, but if you're not in a space to do it right now, like if it is so mentally debilitating to you right now and so scary that you are kind of harming yourself and your well-being, it's okay. Take a break and take that space that you need. I think the other thing to it too is that when we are feeling pressured and we are feeling scared, we're also feeling ashamed. Like why am I such a like mess? Why do I like ruin this for myself and all that kind of stuff? It's okay to take a break. Like if you need like maybe you missed the deadline and go for the next intake. Like what's the worst thing that could happen? The important thing is that you're still trying. I think the worst thing you can do is give up and just disregard everything. But if you can show yourself that you have this will to kind of improve and this will to want to do things, I think that's kind of the first step, and you just like build from there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point that you made, because sometimes, yeah, you just need to take that time for self-care, whether it's just journaling, having a tea, watching your favorite show, kind of whatever it is that you want to do. But you just need to take that time to actually do it, because, having that time to slow down and just relax and reflect, sometimes that's when the biggest messages come across for you. And not putting so much pressure on yourself, to journal. And I think that, it's important to just celebrate the little things, like even the thinking, whether you're thinking about your dreams, your purpose
Yes.
in life, or what you want to do next, that you should celebrate that, because some people don't even go there. Like you said, right? It's kind of the last thing you do if you have that time. So I think that's a really great advice. Um, can you actually, I wanted to see if you could actually share a little bit about how do you maintain a positive mindset? How do you self-reflect and do some self-care and make sure that because you've had those limiting beliefs previously, how do you kind of give yourself that grace or that period of time where you just reflect and reaffirm yourself that you are on the right path for yourself at this time?
So I think a lot of it has been self-awareness has been the key for me, and the having that sense of self-awareness has given me the ability to kind of reach out and take in the resources that I need for my self-care. So yeah, I'm in a counseling program, so that doesn't mean that I am fully aware and I understand everything. Like I have a counselor myself that I regularly see, and that's been super helpful for me because it's just a space and a time where I can kind of talk about things. And I just feel like in my day to day, when you're like really busy and you're distracted, you don't take that time to kind of process and take in what you're feeling and what you're thinking. And it's really nice to have someone who can, I'm just kind of boosting my own profession here, but and you can have someone who can listen to you and just like have no opinion. Like having someone just listen, like it's such a simple concept, but it's so hard to get that all the time. So having that space to do that, that's A. B, I've also realized that if I don't start my day properly, that's kind of where everything kind of goes downhill. Like if I've ever thought about a day where I've been super stressed or super upset or really like triggered by something, I really think about how I started my day. And like you said before, we don't prioritize ourselves. In the morning, I wake up and I do something for myself. I don't start my workday right away. I don't like scroll on social media. I don't reply to messages right away.
Yeah.
I honor myself first and then I go on with my day. And I know a lot of people can resonate with this. Oh, but like I don't have time. I have to get to work. I have to do this. I have to do that. Because we're conditioned to believe that we need to attend to other things before we can attend to ourselves. And for anyone that's listening and they're kind of like, yeah, whatever, like I don't have time for this, it doesn't work. I 100% guarantee if you can at least take 20 minutes to yourself in the morning and just kind of like it's like a reset for yourself, your rest of your day will be dramatically different. Like it's super
Mhm.
helpful. And what else do I do? Yeah, just like knowing when it's too much for me and kind of being vocal in those moments. Like, okay, like a great example this weekend, like we were supposed to do this weekend, and I just like my schoolwork just got so overwhelming, so I felt comfortable enough to reach out to you and
Mhm.
to be able to say, hey, like by the way, I need help, like can we reschedule this? I think a lot of times when we are stressed and just in a weak spot, we're too nervous to reach out because we're too scared of disappointing people or hurting other people and all that kind of stuff. But the world can be a kind place if you want it to be. So
Yeah.
it's just important to reach out and ask for help too.
Yeah, and I think that that's so important. And I think you're so right because we are so scared of dropping balls or feeling like, I
Mhm.
can't, like, we just have too many expectations for ourselves. And we think that, like, in a day, we need to pack in so much and that we need to handle it all and we could do it all. But, what you lose in that is you lose yourself, you lose your own like ability to take care of yourself. Like if you're taking care of your family, you're taking care of your schoolwork, you're taking care of your job requirements and responsibilities, you're taking care of your all this other stuff. We tend to not make space for ourselves, our bodies, and our mental health. And I was just reading actually something about budgeting and money management, and it said that saving isn't the last thing you need to do after with
Mhm.
whatever's left over for the month. That's
Yeah.
not how you should function. You should function that you pick an amount and you say, this is what I'm going to save, and whatever's left over is what I'm spending.
Mhm.
That way you always take care of your savings first, because that's important. It reminds me a lot of what you just said, because you need to take care of yourself first. You need to make time to take care of yourself first, before you can start giving time away to other things that are not taking care, that they're fulfilling, and they are driving forward in their requirements, like if you have a job or you're going to school. But if you don't take care of yourself first, you can't show up 100% for those things, right? You can't show up being the best. And um, I think what you said about social media is so important, because, how many times do you get up in the morning and like you grab your phone first thing and you start scrolling for like half an hour, and last thing you do at night, and you keep it everything in your room beside you. It's draining, and after I got married, I talked about this in one of another episode, but after I got married, my husband is a huge proponent of not leaving your phone inside your room. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
he made me leave my phone outside. And at first I was so worried about it, because I was like, and even to the point where he's like, turn off your notifications overnight. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, if I get an emergency phone call, I need to be there. And he's like, just turn it off. And so now I put my phone on silent almost the whole day, because I don't want to hear the ding, 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 and that in itself creates a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, and so I go to my phone when I want to. I make that time to go to my phone. Yeah. So, taking the time to not scroll on social media is really important, because you need to, like you said, take care of yourself first and honor yourself first. And you'll feel more fresh, less drained,
Yeah.
less anxious, because you don't like, there's so much going on. And sometimes you read your emails or you scroll on social media and you realize, like, there's so much going on, and like, I need to do this too.
Mhm.
And giving yourself that space. And, the biggest thing, I guess, for me is that, because I am trying to limit my social media, and I don't know if you do this too, Vineeta, but having a podcast and having a online presence, means that you have to be on a little bit more, that you would normally. And I was kind of feeling like those boundaries I set for myself were being, violated in a way because, I wasn't honoring that. I wasn't adhering to it. I was like on my phone way more in the last couple of weeks. And then I was watching an episode by someone who's an influencer, or not an influencer, but she creates courses. So she has a huge online presence. But she said that she only spends 45 minutes a day on Instagram.
Mhm.
And I thought to myself, I was like, okay, so if she has over 100,000 followers and only spends 45 minutes, I can also spend only 45 minutes on Instagram. And so I set a timer on my Instagram, actually,
Mhm.
that if I've been on for 40 minutes, it lets me know. And then as soon as I see the timer, then I just don't go on my phone anymore for the rest of the day. Unless I get urgent messages, then I don't go back onto Instagram, because I need time for myself. I need time to do other things, right?
Yep.
So I think that that's so true what you said. Um, I really appreciate everything that you've shared today. I think that this is, it's so inspiring for young people to hear,
Mhm.
that are going through this, because I feel like it's not a unique issue. We've all gone through this. You get out of high school and then you are told to go to university before you even know who you are as a person.
Mhm.
Right. And then you leave university, you get a job, and you kind of do, I call it the box checker. So you do all the things to check the box,
Mhm.
but then you have to come back to this point where you have to reflect on yourself as a person. What is your purpose in life? What is your passion? How can you find fulfillment, and joy and happiness?
Mhm.
And it's important, to come back and reflect on yourself, so I really commend you for being able to do that, at your age, and, realizing that this is the place that you want to be, and understanding that you limit yourself, and, taking the moment to just kind of put that in check and realize that you actually have so much potential, and that you
Mhm.
could achieve any dream that you have. I think that that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and like just even for perspective, a year ago this time, I was in a completely different space and I was just so stressed and so unfulfilled. And then I started to make small changes, and people would ask me, especially with this podcast, what's your long-term goal? And at the time I had no idea, and I kept telling myself, I'm like, I don't know right now, but I'm just making small steps, and I'm hoping that with each small step that I make, more doors will open. And to think about how my life was last year and how it is now, just kind of letting go a bit and just making some choices and making some positive movement and all that, like everything fell into place fine. Like I let go of that fear, and I'm just like, let it be. And you know what, everything worked out fine. So
Yeah.
whoever's listening, I hope that if this can be a good example to just kind of let go a little bit and have some faith in yourself, like you'll be happy you did.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to return the favor on your podcast. So, Vineeta's podcast is called the Young Culture Podcast. So, her handle is at Young Culture Podcast. That's right? Yeah. So check it out. I know she has some really, really great content. I've looked at it, and really
Yeah, thank
interesting
you.
episodes. So check it out, and I'll link all of her social media accounts, as well as how you can connect with her if you have more questions for her, on the show notes, as well as on the blog. Yeah, so thank you so much, Vineeta. I
Thanks for having
sincerely
me.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thanks. I had a great time.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the end of this episode. I hope that you enjoyed the story that Vineeta shared with you, and I hope that it has inspired you to take some action and make small daily commitments to change your life. And remember, you have the ability to catalyze your life from ordinary to extraordinary, and it all lies within you and your mindset. We would love if you could support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcast with your family and your friends and your community, and helping us grow and bring more stories to you that will inspire you and those around you to take action to get set on their own journey to their purpose in life. All right, we'll see you next week. Bye.